Ready to flush your old ideas about art down the drain? In 1917, Duchamp took a urinal, called it Fountain, and sent shockwaves through the art community. With his ready-mades, he asked, "What is art?" And the answer was, anything can be. Marcel Duchamp's Fountain from 1917 was more than a provocative gesture. It was a turning point in the history of art that would reverberate through the 20th and 21st centuries. This work, a simple mass-produced porcelain urinal laid on its side and signed R. Mutt, redefined the boundaries of what could be considered art. By selecting an everyday object, Duchamp proposed that art could be defined not by its aesthetic beauty, but by the artist's intent and context. Fountain challenged the belief that art required traditional techniques or skill. Instead, it introduced a radical notion that art could be about ideas rather than physical beauty. For many critics and audiences of the time, this was scandalous. Art had long been defined by its visual and emotional impact, while Duchamp was shifting the emphasis to a clear intellectual engagement. Duchamp's work asks the viewer to question assumptions about art's role and purpose, inviting new ways of thinking that would influence a wide range of modern and contemporary artists. His work has become the symbol of conceptual art, positioning the artist as a provocateur whose ideas were meant to stimulate discourse, challenge perceptions, and reframe what art could be. Duchamp's innovation laid the groundwork for later avant-garde movements and challenged institutions and audiences to reconsider their own definitions of art. Duchamp's concept of the ready-made was groundbreaking. These were ordinary manufactured objects Duchamp repurposed as art, altering only their context and not their form. Starting with bicycle wheel, Duchamp introduced the idea that an object could become art simply by being chosen and presented by an artist. Through this selection process, Duchamp questioned long-held beliefs about artistry, skill, and originality. This simple shift emphasized the artist's intention and perspective rather than manual skill or visual creativity. Duchamp's ready-mades became a form of iconoclasm, challenging the idea that the artist's hand was essential to the creative process and subverting the notion that art must be handcrafted to hold value. By presenting these objects without altering them, he defied the aesthetic expectations of his time, provoking a sense of discomfort among traditionalists while attracting forward-thinking artists and intellectuals. Duchamp's ready-mades allowed him to critique consumerism, cultural norms, and the notion of taste in art. This concept would go on to inspire many postmodern movements, from Dadaism to pop art, ultimately influencing the way contemporary art addresses issues of authorship, originality, and commercialism. Duchamp's intellectual approach to art set him apart from his contemporaries, as he sought to explore ideas rather than simply create visual works. His brief departure from art in 1913 allowed him to immerse himself in scientific studies, including mathematics and physics, which would later influence his creative process. This theoretical foundation led Duchamp to challenge the visual dominance of art with a more cerebral, conceptual approach. Influenced by the mathematician Henri Poincaré and his work on probability and the fourth dimension, Duchamp experimented with chance and randomness, integrating these ideas into his artwork as a rejection of artistic intention and a celebration of unpredictability. In works like Three Standard Stoppages and Large Glass, Duchamp used scientific and mathematical ideas to explore concepts of chance, perception, and movement. His approach was not focused on the aesthetic appeal, but rather on the ideas these works invoked, aligning his art with abstract concepts rather than tangible beauty. Duchamp's method was experimental and intellectual, inviting viewers to look beyond appearance and into the underlying processes, theories, and questions embedded in his work. His fascination with chance, probability, and optics led to new forms of expression that blurred the line between science and art, inviting audiences to engage their intellect and curiosity as much as their visual sense. His career reflects a stubborn commitment to change, a resistance to artistic conformity, and a continual reinvention of his style and approach. His early forays into Impressionism and Cubism, as well as his embrace of futurist principles in Nude Descending a Staircase, showed that Duchamp's philosophy was his willingness to defy norms. Duchamp's resistance to artistic categorization allowed him to explore his art on his terms, free from the constraints of tradition and public expectation. This aversion to conformity meant he was always one step ahead of his contemporaries, choosing paths others avoided. For Duchamp, the exploration of new ideas and rejection of settled tastes were essential to maintaining creative integrity. His reluctance to repeat himself or settle into a style was his response to what he perceived as the limitations imposed by traditional artistry, and it allowed him to remain innovative and open to diverse influences throughout his life. He viewed the commercial artist as one who caters to society's tastes and expectations, gaining validation through social acceptance and financial success. However, Duchamp saw himself as a freelance artist, a creator who worked independently of societal pressures, often for an audience he imagined would appreciate his work long after his own time. This allowed him to explore radical and unconventional ideas without the need for immediate validation or commercial success. His view on the duality of the artist highlights his belief in the integrity of the creative process, where art need not conform to popular or profitable tastes to be meaningful. Duchamp's work was intended for an audience beyond his own time, a public 50 years later, reflecting his understanding that his ideas were too avant-garde for his contemporaries. He anticipated that future generations, removed from the immediate cultural context, would be more receptive to his conceptual approach and the radical questions he posed about art's purpose. In his view, this ideal audience would engage with his work from a new perspective, appreciating its theoretical provocations rather than judging it against traditional aesthetic standards. Duchamp's awareness of a distant public underscores his insight into the evolving nature of art appreciation. By targeting a future audience, he freed himself from contemporary criticism and allowed his work to exist beyond his own era, transcending temporal limits. Today, Duchamp's impact is evident in the way contemporary art embraces conceptual, process-oriented, and interdisciplinary approaches, confirming his belief that his audience would eventually come to value his contributions. His legacy lives on as artists continue to explore the questions and challenges he introduced, confirming the relevance and timelessness of his revolutionary ideas. For Duchamp, art was a means of transcending the ordinary human experience and entering worlds not bound by time and space. This placed his art in a unique position, different from other human activities, as it allowed individuals to express themselves in ways that defy the limitations of the physical world. Duchamp saw art as an outlet for human individuality, enabling a deeper exploration of existence, free from the constraints of everyday reality. His works, especially the ready-mades, became symbols of this philosophy, representing objects that had shed their practical purposes to take on new symbolic meanings. This transcendent view of art as a form of pure individual expression reinforced Duchamp's commitment to challenging conventions. He saw his work not as confined to a particular style or medium, but as part of a broader inquiry into human consciousness, perception, and intellect. His belief that art could access dimensions beyond time and space was a rejection of traditional aesthetic values, suggesting that art's true purpose lies in its ability to probe existential questions. Duchamp's work and philosophy continue to inspire artists and thinkers who see art as a vehicle for exploring profound ideas and redefining the boundaries of human understanding. And lastly, a final note. Are you passionate about art and believe there's nothing like holding a beautifully crafted art book in your hands? The Essential Duchamp is more than a book. It's an invitation into the world of Marcel Duchamp with all the feel and richness that only a physical book can offer. The Essential Duchamp is a beautifully illustrated book with his groundbreaking works and his persona. Focusing on the celebrated Duchamp collection at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, this book covers Duchamp's revolutionary ready-mades, his experimental alter ego Rose Celavy, and the profound mysteries of his final work, Étant donné. Check it out in the link in the description, where you will be sent to Amazon's own safe bookstore, so you can bring home a piece of art history too. This was all from Leap Art TV. Hit that subscribe button for more art to come. See you in the next chapter of creativity.